The scent of pine needles and damp earth filled my lungs as I trudged through the forest, my boots sinking into the soft ground with each step. Rain had fallen all morning, leaving the woods in that peculiar state of suspended animation, where droplets hung from leaves like tiny crystal pendants, and the world seemed to hold its breath. I was gathering herbs for Mrs. Blackwell, the elderly healer who had taken me under her wing after my parents died. My basket was half filled with yarrow and rosemary when I heard it. A low, pained whimper that didn't belong among the usual forest sounds. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin against the vast silence. Another whimper answered me, weaker this time. I followed the sound, pushing aside wet branches that slapped against my face and left trails of moisture on my skin. The path dipped suddenly, revealing a small clearing where a massive figure lay crumpled on the ground. A wolf. But larger than any wolf I'd ever seen. I should have run. Everyone in our village knew to stay away from the creatures that lurked in the deeper parts of the forest, especially wolves, especially the ones that seemed different. But something about this one held me in place. Blood matted its dark fur, and its eyes. They were shut tight, with ugly gashes across the lids. "Oh God," I whispered, my hand instinctively reaching for the silver pendant my grandmother had given me before she passed. "Always carry this, Alara. It will protect you when darkness comes." The smooth metal warmed against my palm as I approached the wounded animal. The wolf tensed, hackles rising slightly despite its weakened state. Its nostrils flared, catching my scent. I froze, remembering everything I'd been told about wild animals, how they could sense fear, how they would attack when cornered. But this one didn't lunge. It just lay there, blind and vulnerable, its massive chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. "I won't hurt you," I said softly, knowing it couldn't understand my words but hoping my tone might soothe it. "You're hurt pretty badly, aren't you?" The wolf's ears twitched at my voice, and it turned its head slightly in my direction. Blood seeped from the wounds around its eyes, and I noticed other injuries. A deep gash on its flank, what looked like burns on one of its massive paws. This wasn't the result of a natural fight between animals. Someone, or something, had deliberately tried to kill this creature. I set my basket down and slowly removed my jacket. The autumn air immediately sent a chill down my spine, but I didn't hesitate as I approached the wolf. It growled, a warning rumble that vibrated through the clearing. "Easy," I murmured. "I'm just going to check how bad it is." Something shifted in the atmosphere as I knelt beside the wolf. The forest seemed to still, watching us. Even the persistent dripping of rainwater from the canopy above paused, as though nature itself held its breath. With trembling fingers, I reached out and gently touched the wolf's injured flank. Its fur was surprisingly soft beneath the blood and dirt, and unnaturally warm, almost feverish. The wolf flinched, but didn't snap at me. I took that as permission to continue. Using the clean water from my flask, I began to clean some of the more accessible wounds. The gashes were deep, too methodical to be from another animal. These were knife wounds, human-inflicted. "Who did this to you?" I whispered, anger rising in my chest. The wolf's ears pricked at my tone, sensing the shift in my emotions. I wasn't a vet, nor a healer like Mrs. Blackwell, but I knew enough about first aid to recognize that these wounds needed proper treatment. The eyes concerned me most. If the damage was permanent, a blind wolf wouldn't survive long in these woods. "I can't leave you here," I said finally. My decision made despite the warnings echoing in my head. Everyone in the village would call me mad for helping a wolf, especially one this size. But I couldn't just let it die. "I have a shed behind my cottage. It's not much, but it's dry and safe. No one will find you there." I was talking more to myself than to the wolf now, trying to convince myself I wasn't making a terrible mistake. The real challenge would be moving him. The wolf had to weigh at least twice what I did, and in its injured state, I doubted it could walk far. I looked around, spotting a fallen branch that might serve as a makeshift travois. As I gathered materials to build it, the wolf's breathing grew more labored. Whatever had been done to it, infection was setting in. I worked faster, stripping off my thermal shirt and tearing it into makeshift bandages, leaving me in just my thin cotton tank top. Goosebumps spread across my skin, but I ignored the cold as I bound the wolf's most serious wounds to at least slow the bleeding. "This might hurt," I warned as I tied the last bandage around its massive paw. The wolf didn't respond, its consciousness seeming to fade. That frightened me more than any growl would have. It took me nearly an hour to fashion a sturdy enough travois and carefully roll the wolf onto it. By then, my muscles ached, and sweat mixed with the lingering raindrops on my skin despite the chill. I grasped the two ends of the branch and began to pull, my boots digging into the soft earth for traction. The wolf was impossibly heavy, but somehow I managed to drag it inch by painful inch. The journey back to my cottage took 3 times longer than usual. Every few minutes I stopped to check on the wolf, whose breathing had become increasingly shallow. Each time I placed my hand on its chest to feel the heartbeat, I was struck by how human the gesture felt, as though I were checking on a person, not a wild animal. By the time we reached the edge of the woods behind my small cottage, darkness had fallen. The shed stood just 20 yards away, its weathered wood almost invisible in the twilight. I gathered my last reserves of strength, pulling the travois across the overgrown garden. My arms burned with the effort, my legs threatening to buckle beneath me. The shed door creaked as I pushed it open with my shoulder. Inside, gardening tools hung from rusty nails on the walls, and old sacks of seed were stacked in one corner. I cleared a space in the center, brushing away cobwebs and dust before carefully maneuvering the travois through the narrow doorway. "Almost there," I panted, though I wasn't sure if I was encouraging the wolf or myself. With one final effort, I positioned the wolf on the cleanest patch of floor I could manage. In the dim light filtering through the single dirty window, its enormous size was even more apparent. From nose to tail, it must have been over 6 feet long. I slumped against the wall, catching my breath as I observed my new patient. Now that we were here, the enormity of what I'd done hit me. I'd brought a wild, injured predator to my home. What would I feed it? How would I treat wounds this severe? And what would happen when, if, it recovered? "One problem at a time, Alara," I muttered to myself, pushing away from the wall. First, I needed light, medicine, and water. I slipped out of the shed, locking it with trembling hands before hurrying to the cottage. Inside, I gathered lanterns, my first aid kit, clean cloths, a bowl of water, and, after a moment's hesitation, the book of herbal remedies Mrs. Blackwell had given me. The page on treating infected wounds was dog-eared from use. Living alone on the edge of the forest meant I often had to treat my own injuries. Arms laden, I returned to the shed. The wolf hadn't moved, but its sides still rose and fell with labored breaths. I set up the lanterns, their warm glow illuminating the space and revealing the true extent of the wolf's injuries. In addition to the wounds I'd already seen, there were older scars crisscrossing its body, evidence of a hard life. I knelt beside the massive head, examining the damage around its eyes more closely. The cuts weren't as deep as I'd initially feared, but they were definitely intentional. Someone had tried to blind this creature. Anger flared within me again. Who would do such a thing? With gentle movements, I cleaned each wound thoroughly, applying salve and fresh bandages. The wolf stirred occasionally, but remained mercifully unconscious as I worked. When I reached the injuries around its eyes, I hesitated. "I don't know if I can fix this," I whispered, carefully cleaning away the dried blood. "But I'll try." For hours, I tended to the wolf, applying poultices of yarrow and comfrey to fight infection, binding the deeper wounds, and finally covering it with an old blanket to keep it warm. Dawn was breaking by the time I finished, pale light seeping through the dirty window. Exhaustion pulled at every limb as I gathered my supplies. I needed sleep, but first, I needed to check that the wolf was stable. I placed my hand on its chest one more time, feeling the steady, if still weak, rhythm of its heart. "Rest," I murmured. "I'll be back soon." As I turned to leave, something made me pause. I unclasped my grandmother's silver pendant from around my neck, the chain slipping through my fingers like water. After a moment's hesitation, I hung it on a nail just inside the door. "For protection," I said softly, though I wasn't sure anymore who needed protecting, the wolf or me. That night, I dreamt of running through the forest on all fours, the wind carrying 1,000 scents to my nose, the earth yielding beneath powerful paws. I dreamt of hunting, of belonging to something larger than myself. And I dreamt of golden eyes watching me through the darkness, seeing parts of me that I kept hidden from everyone else. I woke with a start, sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember why my muscles ached so badly, or why I smelled of blood and herbs. Then it all came rushing back, the injured wolf, the makeshift travois, the hours spent cleaning wounds. I threw on fresh clothes and hurried outside, dread pooling in my stomach. What if the wolf had died in the night? What if it had somehow escaped and was now stalking the village? What if someone had discovered it, but the shed door was still locked, exactly as I'd left it? I took a deep breath, turned the key, and stepped inside. The wolf lay where I'd left it, but something had changed. Its massive chest rose and fell with stronger, more regular breaths. The inflammation around some of the wounds had already begun to subside. And its head turned toward me as I entered, nostrils flaring to catch my scent. "You're looking better," I said, relief washing over me as I knelt beside it. Hungry, I bet. I'd brought raw meat from my stores, precious protein I couldn't really afford to spare, but necessary if the wolf was to regain its strength. I placed the meat near its snout, and its nose twitched at the scent. With effort, it managed to eat, each movement clearly painful but determined. "That's it," I encouraged. "You need your strength." For 3 days, this became our routine. I'd check on the wolf morning and night, changing bandages, applying fresh salve, bringing food and water. Each day it grew stronger. The wounds began to heal with surprising speed, and by the 4th day, it was able to stand shakily on its massive paws. Only its eyes remained closed, the gashes there healing more slowly than the rest. On the 5th morning, I entered the shed to find the wolf awake and alert, its head turning instantly toward the sound of my footsteps. A low rumble emanated from its chest. Not quite a growl, but a clear acknowledgement of my presence. "Good morning to you too," I said, setting down fresh water. "Let's check those bandages." As I approached, something shifted in the wolf's posture. It tensed, head cocked slightly as though listening intently. I slowed my movements, keeping my voice soft and even. "It's just me, the same person who's been taking care of you all week." The wolf remained still as I knelt beside it, allowing me to check the bandage on its flank. The wound beneath had nearly closed. Another day, and it wouldn't need covering anymore. I marveled at the speed of its healing, far faster than any normal animal. This only confirmed what I'd suspected from the beginning. This was no ordinary wolf. When I reached for the bandages around its eyes, it pulled back slightly. "I need to check if they're healing," I explained, though I knew it couldn't understand my words. "I'll be gentle." Reluctantly, it allowed me to unwrap the bandages. The cuts had closed, forming thin lines across the eyelids. With careful fingers, I applied a final layer of healing salve. "There," I said, sitting back on my heels. "Much better. I don't know if you'll be able to see again, but at least the pain should be—" The wolf's eyelids flickered. I froze, watching as they slowly, painfully opened for the first time since I'd found it in the forest. Instead of the dark brown I'd expected, I found myself staring into eyes of molten gold, bright, intelligent, and very much able to see. Those eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. There was recognition there, and something else, something that sent a shiver down my spine. The wolf rose to its full height, towering over me as I remained kneeling on the shed floor. Its massive head lowered until those golden eyes were level with mine, searching, seeing through every defense I'd ever built. A growl rumbled through the shed, deeper than before, reverberating in my very bones. But it wasn't threatening. It was possessive. "You're my fated mate," the wolf growled, the words impossibly forming in my mind as clearly as if they'd been spoken aloud. I scrambled backward, my heart pounding against my ribs like a caged animal trying to escape. This wasn't happening. Wolves didn't talk. They didn't have golden eyes that could see into your soul. And they certainly didn't claim humans as mates. Yet, as those golden eyes held mine, something ancient and undeniable stirred within me. A recognition that went beyond logic, beyond the boundaries of what I'd been taught was possible. The world as I knew it shattered in that moment, leaving me balanced on the edge of a truth I wasn't ready to face. I scrambled to my feet, putting distance between myself and those burning golden eyes. "You can't. You didn't." My voice trembled as I pressed my back against the shed wall. Wolves don't talk. The massive creature took a step toward me, its movements fluid despite days of immobility. There was nothing awkward or recovering about its gait now, just pure predatory grace. "I'm not just a wolf." The voice resonated not in my ears but directly in my mind, deep and rough like stones tumbling down a mountainside. I glanced frantically at the door, calculating my chances of reaching it before those powerful jaws could close around me. As if reading my thoughts, and perhaps it was, the wolf positioned itself between me and the exit. "I won't hurt you." A hint of something like hurt flickered in those golden eyes. "You saved me. I owe you my life." "What are you?" I managed to ask, my hand instinctively reaching for my grandmother's pendant before remembering I'd left it hanging by the door, just inches from the wolf's massive head. The wolf's gaze followed my movement, then shifted to the pendant. "Silver, he observed. "Smart, but unnecessary." "What are you?" I repeated, forcing strength into my voice. The golden eyes returned to mine. "You already know. Your people have stories about mine, legends, some true, most distorted." My mind raced through the tales told around village fires on winter nights. Stories of men who became beasts under the full moon, of creatures that straddled the boundary between human and animal, werewolves, shapeshifters, monsters. "Shifter," I whispered. The wolf, the shifter, dipped his head in acknowledgement. "My name is Dominic. I am Alpha of the Northern Crescent Pack." The mental voice carried a weight of authority that made my knees want to buckle. "And you, little healer, are my fated mate." Those last words sent a jolt through me, half fear and half something else, something I didn't want to examine too closely. "That's ridiculous," I said, straightening my spine. "I'm human. You're whatever you are. There's no fate connecting us." A low, rumbling sound emerged from his chest. It took me a moment to recognize it as laughter. "Brave," he commented. "Even when afraid, you stand your ground. That's good. An alpha's mate needs courage." "I am not your mate," the words burst from me louder than intended. "I'm a human woman who found an injured animal and made the apparently stupid decision to help it." Dominic's massive head tilted slightly. "And yet you knew I wasn't an ordinary wolf from the moment you found me. Didn't you, Alara?" I froze. "How do you know my name? I've been conscious more than you realize." "I heard you talking to yourself." His mental voice softened slightly. "You have a kind heart. It's rare." Something in his tone made me pause. There was a weariness there, a weight of experience that hinted at hardships I couldn't begin to imagine. Despite my fear, curiosity stirred within me. "What happened to you?" I asked. "Who did that to your eyes?" The golden gaze darkened, pupils contracting to slits. "Hunters. A special kind that knows what we are and how to track us. They've been pursuing me for weeks. Why?" "Because I'm an alpha. Kill the alpha. Weaken the pack." A growl underscored his words. They thought blinding me would make me easier to finish off. I swallowed hard, remembering the methodical nature of the wounds. "Human hunters did this? Not entirely human." Dominic's lip curled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too long for even a wolf. "They have enhancements, ancient magic and modern weapons, a dangerous combination." The enormity of what I'd inadvertently involved myself in began to dawn on me. "If these hunters tracked Dominic here, I need to get you out of here," I said, thinking aloud. "If they find you, they'll kill you too," Dominic finished, his mental voice grim. "For harboring me, for healing me, for being what you are to me, which is nothing," I insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I'm just someone who happened to find you. There are no accidents in this world, little healer." Dominic took another step toward me, his massive form blocking out the meager light from the shed window. "The fact that you heard my call when no one else would have, that you could approach me when I would have torn apart anyone else who tried, that you bear the mark." "What mark?" My hand flew to my face, then my arms, as if I might find some strange symbol emblazoned on my skin. Dominic made that rumbling laugh again. "Not a physical mark, a scent, an essence, something only a shifter can detect. From the moment you approached me in that clearing, even blind and half dead, I knew what you were to me, and what exactly am I supposed to be?" My voice held a challenge now, fear giving way to irritation. "The other half," he said simply. "The balance to my strength, the mercy to my justice, the stillness to my storm." Something in his words resonated within me, striking a chord I hadn't known existed. I'd always felt different, set apart. It was why I lived on the outskirts of the village, why I spent more time with plants and books than with people. But to have this creature, this shifter, claim to understand something about me that I didn't fully understand myself was unsettling. "You're talking nonsense," I said, my voice steadier now. "And even if you weren't, it doesn't matter. You're healed enough to travel. You need to leave before those hunters track you here." Dominic's golden eyes studied me intently. "I won't leave you unprotected. I've managed just fine for 24 years without a werewolf bodyguard. Have you?" He moved closer, and despite myself, I didn't retreat. "Those scars on your arms tell a different story." Self-consciously, I covered the thin white lines that crisscrossed my forearms, reminders of a childhood where being different had made me a target. Those are old. But the memories aren't. His voice in my mind was gentler now. "I can smell the pain they still cause you." "Stop that!" I snapped. "Stop smelling me. Stop pretending you know anything about me." To my surprise, Dominic backed up a step, giving me space. "Forgiveness, little healer. I forget how disconcerting our ways can be to humans." The tension in my shoulders eased slightly at his retreat. "Just tell me what I need to do to get you safely away from here." Dominic seemed to consider this, his massive head turning toward the shed door. Night would be safer for travel, less chance of being seen. His golden gaze returned to me. "But before I leave, there's something you should know." A sense of foreboding crept up my spine. "What?" "The hunters who tracked me, they'll have my scent. And now, they'll have yours too. It's all over me, all through these bandages." He gestured to the wrappings with his snout. "Once they realize an alpha has found his fated mate, they'll hunt you as relentlessly as they hunt me." A cold dread pooled in my stomach. "You're saying I'm in danger whether you stay or go?" "Yes." The simple admission hung between us, heavy with implication. "Then what am I supposed to do?" I asked, frustration edging into my voice. "Leave my home? Hide for the rest of my life? Come with me." The words filled my mind with unexpected warmth. "Return to my pack with me." I laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You can't be serious. I don't know you. I don't know anything about packs or shifters or whatever it is you call yourselves. I have a life here. Do you?" His question was gentle but probing. "You live alone at the edge of the village. The others keep their distance from you, even your mentor, this Mrs. Blackwell. She teaches you but doesn't truly know you, does she?" His accuracy struck a nerve. "That's my choice." "Is it?" Dominic pressed. "Or is it the only way you've found to survive among people who sense your difference without understanding it?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. There was truth in his words, uncomfortable truth that I'd spent years avoiding. The villagers respected my healing abilities when they needed them, but they'd never fully accepted me. I'd always attributed it to being orphaned young, to my preference for solitude, to my eccentric interest in herbs and ancient remedies. But what if there was something more fundamental that set me apart? "Even if what you're saying is true," I said slowly, "that doesn't mean I should run off with a shifter I just met." "Not just any shifter," Dominic corrected, a hint of that alpha authority returning to his mental voice. "Your fated mate, the other half of your soul. You keep saying that like it should mean something to me. It will." There was absolute certainty in his tone. "When you're ready to accept it." A thought occurred to me then, something so obvious I was embarrassed I hadn't asked sooner. "Can you change? Into human form, I mean." Something flickered across those golden eyes. Pain, perhaps, or frustration. Not yet. The wounds were too severe, and shifting requires strength I haven't fully regained. He looked down at his massive paws. Another day? Perhaps two. That explained why he'd remained a wolf, at least. But it raised another question. These hunters, do they know you're still alive? They believe I'm dead. They tracked me to where I fell in the forest, saw the blood I'd lost. But they're thorough. They'll return to confirm, to take trophies. A growl rumbled through him at the last word. So we have some time, I reasoned, to figure out what to do. We? Dominic's ears perked forward, interest evident in his posture. I sighed, running a hand through my tangled blonde hair. Well, it seems my options are either help you or wait for these hunters to show up on my doorstep. So yes, we, for now. Something that might have been a smile pulled at his wolfish mouth. Progress. Don't get used to it, I warned, but there was less heat in my tone than before. I still think this mate business is ridiculous. You'll see, was all he said, that certainty still infusing his mental voice. I shook my head, gathering my scattered thoughts. I need to think, and you need to rest more before you can travel. I'll bring you food later. As I moved toward the door, Dominic shifted to let me pass. A courtesy that surprised me, but as I reached for the handle, his mental voice stopped me. Alara. My name sounded different when he said it, richer, more meaningful somehow. Thank you for saving me. There was genuine gratitude there, and something else, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with his alpha status. It reminded me that beneath the confidence and the supernatural abilities, he had been on the brink of death just days ago. You're welcome, I said simply, then slipped out the door before he could say anything else that might complicate my already reeling thoughts. The crisp autumn air filled my lungs as I crossed the yard to my cottage. Inside, I sank into my chair by the cold fireplace, mind racing. Werewolves were real. One was in my shed. He thought I was his mate. And apparently, deadly hunters might be on their way to kill us both. Just another Tuesday, Alara, I muttered to myself, a hysterical laugh threatening to bubble up from my chest. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions of my normal routine while my mind spun with impossible questions. I sorted herbs, prepared tinctures for Mrs. Blackwell, swept the cottage floors, all while acutely aware of the massive predator just yards away from my back door. A predator who could speak directly into my mind, who claimed to know me better than I knew myself. As evening approached, I prepared food for both of us, stew for me, and more raw meat for Dominic. The thought of feeding raw meat to a being who could communicate intelligently made me pause. Perhaps he'd prefer something cooked. But then, he was still physically a wolf, with a wolf's digestive system. I decided to bring both and let him choose. The sky had darkened to deep indigo by the time I approached the shed again, bowls in hand. I took a deep breath before pushing open the door, unsure what to expect. Dominic lay in the center of the shed, but he wasn't sleeping. Those golden eyes fixed on me the moment I entered, tracking my every movement. He seemed even larger than before, his presence filling the small space completely. I brought dinner, I said, setting down both bowls. I wasn't sure what you'd prefer. His gaze moved between the raw meat and the stew, nostrils flaring slightly. The meat for now, but thank you for considering that I might want something else. The courtesy in his mental voice surprised me again. Somehow I'd expected a creature who called himself Alpha to be more demanding. You're different than I expected, I admitted, settling on the floor a safe distance from him. How so? He began to eat, his movements precise despite his massive form. I watched him for a moment before answering. Less savage, I suppose. The stories about your kind usually involve a lot more snarling and threatening. A rumble of amusement emanated from his chest. Some of us live up to those stories, but leadership requires more than strength and violence. And you're a leader, I said. An alpha, yes. Pride radiated through that simple word. What does that mean exactly? Despite myself, curiosity was winning out over caution. Dominic finished his meal and turned those golden eyes on me fully. It means I am responsible for the safety, well-being, and future of my pack. I make the difficult decisions. I judge disputes. I protect our territory. I lead in times of peace and in times of war. It sounds lonely, I observed, the words escaping before I could consider them. Something flickered in his gaze. Surprise, perhaps, that I had seen so quickly to the heart of it. It can be, he acknowledged. To stand apart, even among your own kind, to bear burdens others cannot share. The echo to my own isolation was unmistakable. I looked away, uncomfortable with the parallel. Your pack, I said, changing the subject slightly. Are they looking for you? Yes. But the hunters drove us apart deliberately. We were scattered. A shadow passed over his features. I don't know how many survived. Sympathy welled within me despite my lingering wariness. I'm sorry. They are strong, resourceful. His certainty was absolute. Those who live will regroup at our secondary territory to the north. It's where I was heading when I was ambushed. How far is it? I asked, still trying to piece together what this meant for my immediate future. 3 days' journey through the mountains. He nodded toward the window, where the distant peaks were visible in the last light of day. I followed his gaze, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the autumn evening. Those mountains were largely unexplored, dangerous terrain filled with sheer cliffs, unpredictable weather, and if Dominic was to be believed, supernatural creatures. And you expect me to go with you, I said, turning back to him. It wasn't a question. I expect nothing, he replied, his mental voice steady. I hope you will choose to come for your own safety as well as other reasons. But the choice must be yours. His restraint surprised me again. Everything I knew about alphas, admittedly from village tales and not first-hand experience, suggested they took what they wanted. They didn't ask. They didn't wait for consent. What if I say no? I challenged, needing to test the boundaries of this strange connection between us. Pain flashed across those golden eyes. Raw and unguarded. Then I will leave as soon as I'm able, drawing the hunters away from you. I will do everything in my power to eliminate the threat they pose. He paused, something vulnerable entering his mental voice. And I will mourn what might have been between us for the rest of my days. The simple honesty of his answer caught me off guard. There was no manipulation there, no attempt to force my hand through guilt or fear, just truth, painful as it was. I need time, I said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course. He dipped his massive head in acknowledgement. But not too much time, little healer. The hunters won't wait forever. As if summoned by his words, a distant howl cut through the night. A sound that raised the hair on the back of my neck. Not a wolf's howl, not quite. Something else. Something wrong. Dominic was on his feet instantly, a growl building in his chest. They're here, he said, his mental voice tense with urgency. Sooner than I expected. We need to go. Now. What? Now? Panic surged through me as the unnatural howl faded into the night. But you said you needed more time to recover, to shift back. Dominic's massive body tensed, his ears swiveling toward the sound. That was before they found us, his golden eyes locked on mine. Pack what you can carry in 5 minutes, nothing more. I can't just... Elara. The way he said my name cut through my protest. They will kill you. Do you understand? Not capture. Not question. Kill. The certainty in his mental voice sent ice through my veins. I nodded once, then rushed from the shed toward my cottage, heart hammering against my ribs. Inside, I grabbed my leather backpack, forcing myself to think practically. Clothes, first aid supplies, my book of remedies, flint and steel, water flask, dried food. My fingers trembled as I shoved everything inside, my mind still reeling. Last, I reached for my grandmother's wooden box on the mantelpiece. Inside lay her journal, filled with remedies and wisdom I couldn't bear to leave behind, and the few pieces of jewelry she'd passed down to me. I tucked them into the pack's inner pocket. Another howl pierced the night, closer this time. I froze, my hand instinctively moving to my throat where my silver pendant usually hung. But it wasn't there. It was still in the shed. I threw on my heaviest coat, slung the pack over my shoulders, and grabbed the hunting knife I kept by the door. Useless against supernatural hunters, probably, but better than nothing. With one last glance at the only home I'd known since my parents died, I stepped back into the night. Dominic was waiting at the shed door, his massive form tense with urgency. "They're coming from the east," he said without preamble. "We'll head west, into the deeper forest, then north toward the mountains." "Can you even travel?" I asked, suddenly doubting the wisdom of fleeing with an injured shifter. "You were half dead 3 days ago. I'm stronger than I look." There was grim determination in his mental voice. "And I heal faster than you might expect. But we need to move, now." I nodded, retrieving my silver pendant from the nail by the door and fastening it around my neck. Dominic watched the movement, something unreadable flickering in his golden eyes. "It won't protect you from them," he said quietly. "But it's good you have something of your bloodline with you." Before I could ask what he meant, another howl split the air. This one so close, it raised goosebumps along my arms. "Stay close to me," Dominic ordered, moving toward the back of my property where the forest began. "Match your steps to mine. They'll track us by scent, but we can confuse the trail." I followed him into the trees, the darkness swallowing us immediately. My human eyes struggled to adjust, but Dominic moved with absolute certainty, his massive form a shadow against shadows. I kept my hand on his flank, letting him guide me through the inky blackness. We moved in silence for what felt like hours, the only sounds our breathing and the soft crunch of fallen leaves beneath our feet, and pause. The forest grew denser, the trees closer together, the underbrush more tangled. Several times I nearly stumbled, but each time Dominic seemed to anticipate it, adjusting his pace or position to steady me. "How much farther?" I whispered finally, my legs burning from the effort of keeping up with his ground-eating stride. "We need to reach the river before dawn," he replied, his mental voice tense with concentration. "Water will mask our scent." Another hour passed in grim silence. My initial fear had settled into a hollow alertness, senses straining for any sign of pursuit. The howls had stopped, which somehow seemed worse than hearing them. At least then we'd known where the hunters were. The trees began to thin slightly, and the sound of rushing water reached us before we saw it. A river, swollen with autumn rains, cutting through the forest like a liquid silver ribbon under the moonlight. "Follow it upstream," Dominic directed, turning north along the bank. "The current is strong, but there's a crossing point a few miles ahead." I nodded, too exhausted for words, and fell into step beside him. The exposed riverbank made me feel vulnerable after the covering of the forest, but at least here I could see more than 3 feet ahead of me. "Who are these hunters?" I asked finally, needing to understand what we were running from. "Why do they want to kill shifters?" Dominic was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he did, his mental voice was heavy with ancient hatred. "They call themselves purifiers. They believe shifters are abominations, unnatural beings that corrupt the human bloodline. But you're not human," I pointed out. "You're something else." A grim amusement colored his response. "We're both human and wolf. That's what they can't accept, the blending of what they see as separate worlds." He glanced at me, golden eyes gleaming in the darkness. "And they especially hate when humans and shifters mix." The implication hung in the air between us. Fated mates. Human and shifter, bound together. "Is that why they tried to kill you specifically?" I asked. "Because you're an alpha?" "Partly. Kill the alpha, destabilize the pack. But there's more." He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "The Northern Crescent Pack has always been progressive in our dealings with humans. We trade with certain settlements. We have alliances. The purifiers see this as corruption." I processed this information, trying to fit it into everything I'd been taught. The village elders had always warned us to stay away from the deeper woods, to beware creatures that weren't quite animal, but weren't human either. But they'd never mentioned trade or alliances. "My village fears the forest," I said slowly, "but I never heard of any contact with your kind." Your village is not among our allies, Dominic confirmed. But others further north have known of us for generations. They provide metals we can't mine, textiles we can't weave. We offer protection, hunting rights, healing remedies. Healing remedies? That caught my attention. Like what I use. Those golden eyes studied me with renewed interest. Some of your knowledge may have roots in shifter tradition, yes. Especially if your grandmother taught you. My hand moved instinctively to the pendant at my throat. My grandmother was human. Was she? There was a gentleness in his question that made my heart stutter. Are you certain? Before I could respond, Dominic suddenly froze, his hackles rising. A low growl vibrated through his massive chest. What is it? I whispered, fear clenching my stomach. They've picked up our trail again. He turned to me, urgency in every line of his powerful body. We need to cross now. The water will mask our scent. I looked at the rushing river doubtfully. It's too strong. I can't swim across that. You won't have to. Without warning, he dropped to his belly on the rocky shore. Get on my back. What? There's no time to argue, Alara. The Alpha Authority returned to his mental voice. Get on my back. Hold tight to my fur. I'll carry you across. Swallowing my fear, I climbed awkwardly onto his back, my fingers sinking into his thick fur. He was enormously broad, my legs barely reaching around his sides. As soon as I was positioned, he rose and moved toward the water. Hold your breath when I tell you, he instructed. The current will push us downstream before we reach the other side. Don't let go no matter what. I nodded, then realized he couldn't see me. Okay. I managed, my voice small with fear. Dominic waded into the river, the cold water swirling around his legs. I felt the powerful muscles beneath me bunch and release as he fought against the current. When the water reached his chest, it began to splash up against my boots. Hold your breath, he commanded. Now. I sucked in air just as he launched himself fully into the current. The shock of cold as water closed over us nearly made me gasp, but I held tight, my fingers locked in his fur as the river seized us in its grip. Dominic's powerful legs churned beneath us, fighting the current that wanted to sweep us downstream. Everything became a blur of cold and pressure and darkness. My lungs began to burn. Just when I thought I couldn't hold my breath any longer, we burst through the surface. Dominic's legs found purchase on the riverbed, and with a tremendous effort, he hauled us both toward the far bank. We collapsed on the shore, both gasping for breath. I rolled off his back, coughing up river water, my clothes soaked and clinging to my skin. The autumn night air, already chilly, now felt like winter against my wet body. We need to keep moving, Dominic said, shaking himself vigorously. Water flew from his thick coat in all directions. You'll warm up once we're moving. But first... He moved closer, his massive body radiating heat despite the river crossing. Stay still, he instructed, then began to press his body against mine, rubbing his wet fur against my soaked clothes. I started to protest, then realized what he was doing, transferring his scent to me, masking my human smell with his own. The intimacy of the gesture made my cheeks burn despite the cold. It will confuse them, he explained, seeming to sense my discomfort. Make it harder to separate your trail from mine. When he was satisfied, he pulled back. There's a cave system about 2 hours north. We can rest there during daylight. The purifiers prefer to hunt at night. I nodded, pushing myself to my feet with trembling arms. Every muscle ached, and the wet clothes were already stiffening with cold. But the alternative, being caught by the hunters, pushed me forward, one painful step at a time. The rest of the night passed in a haze of exhaustion. We left the riverbank, climbing steadily into increasingly rocky terrain. The trees thinned, replaced by scrubby bushes and exposed stone. Dominic set a punishing pace, though I noticed him checking on me frequently, adjusting his stride when I fell too far behind. Dawn was breaking by the time we reached the caves, a series of dark openings in a cliff face, partially hidden by stunted trees. Dominic led me to one that was deeper than it first appeared, the entrance narrow but opening into a larger space inside. Rest, he said, once we were safely inside. I'll keep watch. I sank to the ground, my legs finally giving out now that we'd stopped moving. The cold set in with renewed vengeance. My teeth chattered uncontrollably, my hands numb and clumsy as I tried to remove my sodden backpack. Without warning, Dominic moved behind me, his massive body curling around mine like a living blanket. The heat radiating from him was immediate and intense. What are you doing? I stammered, too cold to pull away. Keeping you warm, he replied simply. Humans are fragile. You could die from cold. I should have protested. This creature, this shifter, was still largely a stranger to me, regardless of his claims about fated mates, but the warmth was undeniable, seeping into my frozen limbs, and exhaustion pulled at me with irresistible force. Sleep. Dominic's mental voice gentled. I'll wake you if there's danger. As consciousness slipped away, I felt something that might have been a wolf's muzzle, gently nudging my hair, almost like a caress. I woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the stone walls surrounding me and the strange weight pressed against my back. Memories rushed back, the flight through the forest, the river crossing, the hunters pursuing us, and Dominic, the shifter who had called me his fated mate. I turned my head carefully to find him still curled protectively around me, his massive body radiating heat that had dried my clothes and warmed my core. His golden eyes were open, watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. You're awake, he observed, his mental voice carrying a note of relief. How do you feel? I took inventory of my body, muscles aching from the grueling journey, but no longer frozen or dangerously cold. Better, I admitted. How long did I sleep? Most of the day. He nodded toward the cave entrance, where the light had shifted to the golden hue of late afternoon. You needed it. I sat up slowly, aware of every protesting muscle. And the hunters? They lost our trail at the river as I'd hoped. His massive head turned toward the cave entrance. But they're persistent. They'll keep searching. The reminder of our situation settled heavily on my shoulders. We'd escaped for now, but we were still 2 days' journey from his pack's territory. 2 more days of running, hiding, surviving. Are you stronger today? I asked, eyeing him carefully. The wounds I'd treated were healing with remarkable speed, but he'd pushed himself hard during our escape. Dominic rose to his feet, stretching his massive body in a way that reminded me he was very much a predator, regardless of his intelligence and speech. Strong enough, he confirmed. And growing stronger by the hour, I watched him move around the cave, noting the fluid grace that had been absent when I'd first found him. Will you be able to shift soon, back to human form? He paused, considering. Perhaps by tomorrow night. The healing takes priority in my body. The shift requires energy I can't spare yet. Curiosity pushed past my caution. What do you look like? As a human, I mean. Something that might have been amusement flickered in those golden eyes. Worried about what you've tied yourself to, little healer? I haven't tied myself to anything, I reminded him, though the protest lacked the heat it had held the day before. I'm just trying to understand what I've gotten myself into. Dominic approached, settling on his haunches before me. Even seated, his head was level with mine, a reminder of his unnatural size. As a human, I stand over 6 feet tall, dark hair, these same eyes. A hint of pride colored his mental voice. Strong, as befits an alpha. I tried to picture it. This massive wolf transformed into a man with golden eyes. The image that formed in my mind was both disturbing and strangely compelling. And your pack? I asked, distracting myself from that unsettling thought. How many of you are there? 23, he answered. Or there were before the attack. My brother Rafe is my second. He will have led the survivors to the Northern Territory. A shadow passed over his features. If he survived. The concern in his voice was unmistakable, reminding me that whatever else he was, Dominic cared deeply for those under his protection. It made him seem more human, somehow. Tell me about them, I said, genuinely curious now. Your pack. Surprise flickered across his wolfish features. You truly want to know? I nodded. If I'm going to be traveling to their territory, temporarily, I added quickly, I should understand what I'm walking into. Dominic settled more comfortably, his golden eyes warming. The Northern Crescent Pack has held our territory for 10 generations. We are smaller than some packs, but stronger in ways that matter. more adaptable. Pride resonated in his mental voice. My father led us for 30 years before passing the alpha mantle to me. And your mother? I asked. She was his fated mate, human, like you. His gaze held mine. She taught our pack much about healing with herbs and roots, knowledge she brought from her human village. This revelation hit me with unexpected force. Your mother was human? So you're half shifter, half human, he confirmed. As are many in our pack. It strengthens our bloodline, brings new gifts. The purists, both human and shifter, hate this mixing, but we have thrived because of it. I thought of my grandmother then, of her unusual knowledge of plants, her comfort with the forest when others feared it. The pendant at my throat suddenly felt heavier. You think my grandmother might have been connected to shifters, I said. It wasn't a question. The pendant you wear, silver inscribed with ancient symbols. It's a token of protection traditionally given to human mates of shifters. His golden eyes lingered on the pendant. And your affinity for healing, your comfort with the forest, these things often run in bloodlines where humans and shifters have mixed. My mind reeled with the implications. Had my grandmother known about shifters? Had she been involved with one? Was that why I'd always felt different, because some part of me wasn't entirely human? I don't know if I can believe that, I said finally. You don't have to decide now. Dominic's response was surprisingly gentle. But keep your mind open to possibilities beyond what your village has taught you. I nodded slowly, then reached for my backpack. We should eat something before we move on. The practical task helped ground me as my thoughts threatened to spiral. I retrieved some dried meat and fruit, offering a portion to Dominic. He accepted with what might have been a wolfish smile. You'll find our pack eats well. Hunting is good in our territory, and we trade with human allies for grain and vegetables we can't grow ourselves. The image of werewolves farming made me smile despite myself. You grow crops? Some. We're not just warriors and hunters, little healer. We build. We create. We tend the land. There was a wry note in his mental voice. We're more civilized than your stories would have you believe. We ate in companionable silence, the tension that had marked our early interactions gradually softening. As the light outside the cave faded toward dusk, Dominic rose to his feet. We should move soon. Travel by night is safer while the purifiers hunt us. I repacked my meager supplies and shouldered my bag, steeling myself for another grueling journey. Which way? Northeast, through the high passes. He moved to the cave entrance, scanning the darkening forest below. The route is difficult, but less likely to be watched. We set out as the last light faded from the sky, the first stars appearing overhead. The terrain was more challenging than the previous night. Steeper, rockier, with narrow paths that wound between sheer cliffs. Dominic led the way, his night vision clearly superior to mine. Several times he warned me of drop-offs I couldn't see until I was nearly upon them, his mental voice tense with concern. Stay closer, he finally ordered, after I narrowly avoided a nasty fall. Step where I step. I swallowed my pride and did as he suggested, keeping my eyes on his massive paw prints in the thin layer of snow that had begun to dust the higher elevations. The cold was more intense here, the wind cutting through my clothing despite the exertion of climbing. We paused at a sheltered overlook, the vast forest spread below us like a dark sea. In the far distance, pinpricks of light marked human settlements, including, somewhere among them, my village. A pang of something like homesickness twisted in my chest, though I couldn't honestly say I missed the place or its people. Second thoughts? Dominic asked, his golden eyes studying my expression. Just processing, I replied truthfully. 2 days ago, my biggest concern was gathering enough herbs for winter. Now I'm fleeing supernatural hunters with a werewolf who thinks I'm his destined mate. A rumble of amusement emanated from his chest. Life changes quickly sometimes. That's putting it mildly. I hugged my arms around myself against the cold. Do you really believe that? About fated mates, I mean. Dominic's gaze turned serious. It's not a matter of belief. For my kind, it's a certainty. A recognition that goes beyond choice or circumstance. He moved closer, his warmth a welcome barrier against the mountain chill. From the moment I caught your scent, even blind and dying, something in me recognized something in you, the other half of what I am. But I'm human, I protested, though with less conviction than before. Mostly human, I amended, thinking of my grandmother's pendant. The bond doesn't care about those distinctions. His mental voice softened. It sees only what completes us, what makes us whole. There was such certainty in his words, such absolute conviction. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as supernatural nonsense, but another part, a part I was increasingly unable to ignore, responded to the truth in what he was saying. I'd felt it too. That strange recognition when our eyes first met, that sense of connection that went beyond logic or experience. And if I don't want this bond? I asked, needing to understand my options. Pain flickered in those golden eyes, but he answered honestly. You can reject it. Live your life apart from me. The bond would remain, but dormant, unfulfilled. And what would happen to you? He looked away, out over the darkened landscape. I would survive, lead my pack, protect our territory. His mental voice grew quieter. But there would always be something missing. A hollow place no power or achievement could fill. The raw vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. This powerful alpha, this predator who could tear apart enemies with terrifying ease, was acknowledging that I, a human healer, had the power to leave him permanently incomplete. I'm not saying no, I found myself saying. I just need time. This is all so new. Dominic turned back to me, hope kindling in his golden gaze. Time I can give you, Alara. But the choice will come sooner than you might think. Before I could ask what he meant, his head snapped up, ears swiveling toward something I couldn't hear. A growl built in his chest, the sound vibrating through the night air. What is it? I whispered, fear instantly washing away our moment of connection. Purifiers, he snarled, the word filled with hatred. They found our trail somehow. Panic flared within me. How? We crossed the river. They have ways. Unnatural tracking methods. Dark magic. He turned his massive head, scenting the air. 3 of them, coming up the eastern path. What do we do? Dominic's golden eyes met mine, an apology in their depths. We run, again, but the path ahead narrows. There's no way to hide our tracks in the snow. The implication was clear. They would follow us, no matter how fast we moved. Then we need to confront them, I said, the words spilling out before I could consider them. Set a trap rather than be hunted. Surprise flashed across his wolfish features. You would fight? These aren't ordinary hunters, Alara. They're killers with ancient weapons specifically designed to destroy my kind. I touched the silver pendant at my throat, my grandmother's legacy suddenly feeling like more than just protection. I've spent my life gathering knowledge others ignored. Plants that heal, yes, but also plants that do other things. I met his gaze steadily. If they're hunting wolves, let's show them we have teeth too. Something shifted in Dominic's golden eyes. Respect mingled with a fierce pride. Tell me what you need. I need time to prepare, I said, already reaching for my backpack. And certain plants that grow in these mountains. Can you hold them off long enough for me to set something up? Dominic's golden eyes gleamed with a predator's anticipation. I can lead them away, then double back. Buy you perhaps 30 minutes. His massive head tilted. What are you planning, little healer? I pulled out my grandmother's journal, fingers quickly finding the page I needed. Something my grandmother taught me. A mixture that, when burned, creates a smoke that disorients, confuses, makes it hard to distinguish friend from foe. I looked up at him. If they rely on their senses to track us, we'll take those senses away. Admiration flickered in his gaze. And while they're disoriented, you're the alpha, I said simply. I imagine you know what to do with disoriented enemies. A low, rumbling sound emerged from his chest, part growl, part purr. Indeed. He rose to his full height, suddenly seeming larger than before. There's a plateau a half-mile ahead with a single approach path. It would make a good trap point, I nodded, already cataloging what I would need. I saw moonshade growing on the slopes earlier, and frost lichen on the rocks. I'll need both. Be careful, Dominic warned. The purifiers may have scouts ahead of their main group. I'll stay hidden. I hesitated, then added, You be careful too. Don't take unnecessary risks just to buy me time. Something softened in his fierce gaze. Your concern is warming. With that, he turned and loped back down the path we'd climbed, his massive form soon swallowed by darkness. I worked quickly, gathering what I needed from the mountainside, moonshade with its silvery leaves, frost lichen clinging to north-facing rocks, pine resin to bind it all together. My fingers moved with practiced precision despite the cold, preparing the mixture according to my grandmother's recipe. All the while, my mind raced with questions about her. Had she learned this from shifters? Had she used these mixtures to protect herself or someone she loved? The plateau Dominic had mentioned was easy to find. A flat expanse of rock with steep drops on 3 sides and a narrow path leading to it. I worked at the center, creating 3 small piles of the mixture, positioned to spread smoke across the entire area when lit. Then I retreated to the sheltered overhang he'd specified, waiting for his return. Every sound made me tense. The whisper of wind through stunted pines, the distant cry of a night bird, the occasional skittering of small creatures across stone. The minutes stretched endlessly, my imagination conjuring increasingly dire scenarios. Had the purifiers caught him? Was he wounded again? Or worse? Just as panic began to rise in my throat, a dark shape materialized at the edge of my vision. Dominic moved silently for something so large, appearing beside me as if formed from the shadows themselves. They follow, he confirmed, his mental voice taut with controlled aggression. 3, as I thought, well armed. They wear amulets of some kind, magic to enhance their tracking abilities. How close? I whispered. Minutes behind me. His golden eyes gleamed in the darkness. I led them in circles before heading here. They're frustrated, growing careless. A wolfish smile revealed gleaming teeth. Angry hunters make mistakes. I nodded, my heart pounding against my ribs. The mixture is ready. Once they're fully on the plateau, I'll light it. And I'll be waiting. He turned to go, then hesitated. Ilara. My name in his mind was tinged with something I couldn't quite name. If anything happens to me, it won't, I interrupted, surprising myself with my certainty. Those golden eyes studied me for a long moment. Nevertheless, if it does, head north. Find my pack. Tell them who you are, what you are to me. They will protect you. Before I could respond, he melted back into the shadows, positioning himself for ambush. I crouched lower in my hiding place, pulling out the flint and steel from my pack. Now there was nothing to do but wait. They came like wraiths through the mountain mist. 3 figures dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb, rather than reflect the faint moonlight. They moved with unnatural coordination, scanning the plateau methodically as they advanced. Even from a distance I could see the amulets Dominic had mentioned, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light against their chests. One gestured silently to the others, pointing to tracks in the thin snow covering the stone. Dominic's tracks, deliberately left to lead them into our trap. They followed cautiously but steadily, weapons at the ready. As they passed the first of my prepared mixtures, I struck the flint. The spark caught immediately, the dry mixture flaring with a hiss. The nearest hunter whirled toward the sound, but it was too late. Thick, greenish-white smoke billowed upward, spreading across the plateau with unnatural speed. I quickly lit the other 2 piles, creating a dense fog that soon obscured the entire area. Confused shouts erupted from within the smoke cloud, followed by the distinctive sound of weapons being drawn. I pressed myself against the rock face, trying to make myself as small as possible as the acrid scent reached my hiding place. "It's a trap!" one of them called, voice muffled by the smoke. "Form up, back to back!" But their coordination was already failing, the smoke working on their senses as my grandmother had promised it would. I heard coughing, cursing, the sound of someone stumbling over rocky ground. Then came a sound that raised the hair on my neck, a deep, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Dominic, circling his prey. One of the hunters fired blindly, the report of his weapon echoing off the mountain walls. Another shouted in panic, words dissolving into a scream that cut off abruptly. There was a heavy thud, the sound of someone, hitting stone. More gunfire, more desperate shouting. The smoke swirled, occasionally thinning enough for me to glimpse shadowy figures in combat. The massive form of Dominic darting between the increasingly disorganized hunters. He was using the smoke to his advantage, appearing and disappearing, striking and retreating before they could target him. A sudden gust of wind cleared the air momentarily, revealing a scene from nightmare. One hunter down, unmoving, another backing away with a bloodied arm, the third taking aim at a spot where Dominic had been a second earlier. The amulets around their necks pulsed with that unnatural blue light, seemingly fighting against the effects of the smoke. The wind shifted again, and the smoke closed in once more. More sounds of struggle reached me. Snarls, curses, the meaty impact of body against body. I pressed my hands over my mouth to keep from making a sound, torn between fear and a strange, fierce hope that Dominic would prevail. Suddenly, a figure stumbled out of the smoke cloud, heading directly toward my hiding place. One of the hunters, disoriented and coughing, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. He hadn't seen me yet, but another few steps and he would. My hand closed around a fist-sized rock. I had one chance, one moment to act before he spotted me. Drawing on courage I didn't know I possessed, I rose from my hiding place and struck with all my strength. The rock connected with the side of his head with a sickening crack. He crumpled instantly, the glowing amulet at his chest flickering and dying as he fell. I stood frozen, the bloody rock still clutched in my trembling hand, staring at the unmoving figure at my feet. Had I killed him? The thought should have horrified me. I was a healer, sworn to preserve life, but in that moment, all I felt was a cold, clear certainty that I had done what was necessary to survive. From within, the thinning smoke came a final, cut-off cry, then silence. I held my breath, straining to hear any sound of Dominic. Had he been wounded? Killed? Ilara. His mental voice reached me before I saw him, relief flooding through me at the sound. He emerged from the dissipating smoke, blood darkening his muzzle and chest fur, but moving with the fluid strength of a predator still very much in his prime. His golden eyes took in the scene before me, the fallen hunter, the rock in my hand, the blood staining both. Something like pride flickered in his gaze. "You protected yourself well," he said, approaching with surprising gentleness for a creature that had just been locked in mortal combat. "Is he dead?" I whispered, looking down at the hunter. Dominic sniffed the still form. "No, unconscious only." His gaze lifted to mine. "Does that ease your healer's conscience?" It did, though I wasn't proud of the relief I felt. "And the others?" "We'll hunt no more." His mental voice was grim, but satisfied. "The threat is ended for now, though where there are 3 purifiers, eventually more will come." I nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. I had helped kill men who would have killed us without hesitation. But still, the weight of that knowledge settled over me like a physical thing. As if sensing my thoughts, Dominic pressed his massive head gently against my side. "You did what was necessary to survive. There is no shame in that." I let my hand rest on his blood-matted fur, drawing strength from his solid presence. "What now?" "Now we continue north," he said. "We're less than a day's journey from my pack's territory. We can reach it by tomorrow night if we push hard." The certainty in his voice steadied me. Despite everything, the danger, the violence, the upheaval of everything I'd thought I knew, I felt safer with him than I ever had in my village. "Let's go then," I said, wiping the blood from my hands onto the snow. "I'm ready." We traveled through the remainder of the night and much of the following day, stopping only for brief rests. Dominic pushed himself hard despite his recent injuries, and I matched his pace as best I could. By late afternoon, something changed in the landscape. Subtle markers I wouldn't have noticed without him pointing them out. Claw marks on certain trees. Stones arranged in patterns that seemed random, but weren't. We had entered shifter territory. As twilight approached, Dominic grew increasingly alert, scenting the air frequently. "We're close," he told me. "My pack is ahead." Anxiety twisted in my stomach. "Will they accept me?" He turned those golden eyes on me, warmth and certainty radiating from them. You are my fated mate. They will accept you as their own. A note of wry humor entered his mental voice. Though they may be surprised to see me alive, and with a mate, no less. We crested a final rise, and the valley below opened before us. Nestled among ancient trees stood structures, not quite buildings as my village would recognize them, but clearly homes. Smoke rose from stone chimneys, and figures moved between them in the gathering dusk. Some were wolves, massive like Dominic, though none quite as large. Others were human in form, dressed in leathers and furs, and some seemed caught between, neither fully wolf nor fully human. My pack, Dominic said, pride evident in his mental voice. My home. He paused, those golden eyes finding mine. Our home, if you choose it. As we descended toward the settlement, the first shifters noticed us. Calls went up. Voices both human and wolf, carrying messages I couldn't understand. Figures began rushing toward us, their initial wariness transforming into joyous recognition as they identified their alpha. A tall, powerfully built man with the same golden eyes as Dominic broke from the group, running toward us with naked emotion on his face. "Brother," he called, his voice rough with feeling. "We thought you dead." Behind him came others, shifters in various forms, all radiating the same mixture of disbelief and joy. Their alpha had returned from the dead. And as Dominic pressed against my side, a gesture of both protection and pride as he prepared to introduce me to his pack, I realized something with sudden crystal clarity. This strange, dangerous, magical creature beside me, he felt like home in a way my village never had. I didn't know what the future held, whether I would fully embrace the bond between us, or how I would fit into this new world. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere, to someone. And for now, that was enough.